Alright, let's see what the new M20 commanders can do. Yarok the Desecrated versus Sisters of Stone Death. Well, we can go into Birds of Paradise, then a Signet, or a Kadama's Reach if we get into a land. We are on the play, so there's not as much chance of that as there would be otherwise. Let's get in for the birds, and we'll get a black source with this. Multiple ways to build Yarok, as far as I can see. We've gone for enter the battlefield effects mostly in this deck. There's a little bit of landfall in here, but mainly it's enter the battlefield effects. Death Touch, Lifelink, 5 mana in Sultai for a 3/5. If a permanent entering causes the triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, then it triggers an additional time. It's a Panharmonicon with legs, basically. Like I said, we're going for enter the battlefield effects. A land is really good. That fixes our land drops for the next, well, for next turn really. Let's go for black and green. And that means we can go for our commander next turn. And then make use of things like Noxious Gearhulk, which will trigger twice on entry. And Eternal Witness will as well, so we can get things back from the graveyard a couple of times with that. Our opponent has started things off with an Amulet of Vigour, which will untap lands when they enter tapped. Sisters of Stone Death is 8 mana in Golgari for a 7/5. For green, a target creature has to block it this turn if able. For Golgari, you exile a creature that is blocking or has been blocked by it. And then for 3 mana, put a creature that's been exiled by it onto the field under your control. And that was a Nausea, -1/-1 to all creatures, so that gets rid of the birds. So that takes us, well, I was going to say that takes us off our commander, but it in fact doesn't, thanks to that Sol Ring. So let's get that down, that's a really lucky draw for us. The Panharmonicon with legs has come down, Death Touch and Lifelink. And like I was saying, there's multiple ways to build this. I really wanted to make a Lands Matter version of this, but I've got a few Lands Matter decks already, so I decided to go with something slightly different. Might make multiple versions of this deck. And looking at cards for Omnath, you could actually go Elemental Tribal with this as well, I think, because you have access to some really good ones like, what is it, Risen Reef or something like that. That's a really good elemental, whatever it's called. Now we could go for, yeah, I say we go for a Muldrifter here, because that's going to draw us quite a few cards. And we're not going to be swinging in anyway. Yeah, let's go for Muldrifter. And we can hardcast Muldrifter. And when this thing enters, it'll draw us 2 cards, but that will happen twice because it is an ETB effect. So we will in fact draw 4 cards here. And there's the Panharmonicon, that'll double things up a couple of times now. The dream is to have Panharmonicon and Yarok in play at the same time. But we've just managed to keep a full grip in play here, so we'll just pass over to our opponent. Didn't get into any lands, curiously enough. A Darksteel Ingot for our opponent. They are still a ways away from getting their commander down. We've only got 3 cards left in hand. There's a Reflecting Pool. That's really good because it means we can go for Panharmonicon into E-Witness if we want to. But I think we just get some stuff out of our hand for now. Let's get the Signet down. We'll just concentrate on furthering our mana for now. And then it's Panharmonicon. That enters, and now we'll go for the Sakura Tribe Elder. That's not an ETB effect, but it is a really good turn 2 ramp spell, so we'll just get that down and swing in with the Muldrifter, which does have flying. And next turn we can really start doing some crazy stuff. A -1/-1 counter onto the Muldrifter, and our opponent gets to draw a card. We'll just sack the Sakura Tribe Elder in response to that. Not really too worried about Muldrifter dying, it's done its damage now pretty much by drawing us a bunch of cards. And it's the perfect target to grab back with Eternal Witness anyway. We'll be able to get a bunch of stuff back with E-Witness once it enters, if we even feel the need to do that. What's our opponent on now? Yeah, they're on 6 mana, so they could do some good stuff. But they're just worried about controlling the board currently, I think. Yeah, Duplicant's nice. So we've got removal in Noxious Gearhulk and Duplicant. I can't resist getting down this Woodland Bellower. So we'll go for exactly that. When this enters, we can search for a non-legendary green creature with CMC 3 or less and put it into play. And that will happen 3 times. 1 from the Harmonicon, 1 from the creature itself, and 1 from Yarok. So let's see what we can grab here. I think Wood Elves is a good starting point. And Wood Elves will trigger a bunch of times because that has an ETB effect as well. So we'll actually get 3 forests straight into play here. We'll choose Dryad Arbor for the first one, just to get Summoning Sickness off that as quickly as we can. Then how about a Tropical Island? And we'll just get down a basic as well. Might have been worth getting down a Lotus Cobra before the Wood Elves actually, now that I think about it. This is my first time playing this deck. Okay, yeah, we'll go for the Lotus Cobra now. Should have done that last time, really. But now we can go for a Farhaven Elf, and that will also occur 3 times. We'll get a basic Swamp into play tapped. And Lotus Cobra triggers twice thanks to Yarok. So that'll get us 2 mana for the land entering. We'll add black twice. And then the second Farhaven Elf trigger. Props to our opponent for playing this out. We'll get an island into play. And again, Lotus Cobra triggers a couple of times. Add a couple of blue this time, then the final Farhaven Elf trigger. And we'll go for another Swamp. Add a green and a black. Alright, and then E-Witness comes into play. E-Witness triggers 3 times. We'll get the Worldly Tutor, the Kodama's Reach, and the Misty Rainforest. Because we can get multiple pieces of mana from the Misty Rainforest thanks to the Lotus Cobra, triggering a bunch of times. Let's play the Misty Rainforest. Didn't realise we hadn't played a land yet. We'll add some green. And then let's go in for a Demonic Tutor. And we'll put Venture into our hand just in case we want to counter something. Let's go for the Noxious Gearhulk, and then I think we can look at passing over to our opponent. We would get to blow up 3 things here if our opponent had 3 things in play. We'll just point everything at the Gorgon. This might be Gorgon Tribal actually, now that I think about it. And now we will finally swing in. Our opponent passing straight through the turn. Even if they've got a board wipe, we can counter that with Venser. And then Venser, good thing about that in this deck is that it can bounce itself back to our hand, because it'll have multiple triggers, so we can just do that over and over again. Nice scry from our opponent. That's an Ugin's Conjurant with 7 going into X. That means it enters with X plus counters. If damage would be dealt to it and it has a plus counter on it, prevent the damage and remove that many. We will let that into play. They can soak up a little bit of damage with that. Let's go for the Worldly Tutor that we got back with our Eternal Witness. And we'll just go for something nice and simple like Wall of Blossoms. Don't want to rub it into our opponent too much. Let's play the Wall of Blossoms. And this will draw us a card when it enters, but in this case it will draw us a couple. If we were up against a more competitive opponent, could have gone for Tatyolva there and then gotten a bunch of landfall going with Kodama's Reach and drawn a boatload of cards on landfall. But we'll just see what we draw here and then go into combat. Draw 3 cards from the Wall of Blossoms. We get into a couple of lands and a Toxic Deluge. They're not the best. So in that case, I think we go for... We'll just get in the Shockland tapped. That will give us a couple of mana from Lotus Cobra. And we'll just go for our little Venser trick to get the Ugin's Conjurer out of the way. First one can bounce that back, and then the other 2 can go for Eternal Witness and the Venser itself. Then we can really get a lot of ETB effects going if we want to. Not going to drag the game out any longer than we need to, but if our opponent does manage to wipe the board somehow, then it'll be good to have E-Witness and Venser still in hand. And then we'll just go to swing in here. Our opponent's being a really good sport about all this. Obviously a more casual player than we are. Okay, just as I was singing my opponent's praises for playing it through, turns out that they're not too happy about how things are going. I do want to show the deck off to you all, and our opponent might not know that, in fact they probably don't know that we're recording a game for the channel. Probably don't even know the channel exists. But I do want to show off the interaction. Like I've said a few times, I actually don't want to make fun of my opponent by dragging out the game too long. And we're actually not that far behind. In fact, we're not behind on the clock at all, so yeah, I don't feel too badly about dragging the game out. Not that we have dragged the game out intentionally. I've just played my deck. Alright, I only left that message there because, just for my own amusement, my opponent's already left the game, so I know that they can't see that message. That was just a little bit of humour for all of you. Yeah, so on the very first game of playing Yarok the Desecrated, already causing lots of salt, this wasn't really a fair game because we were up against a more casual Gorgon tribal player, I think. Not that we were in the casual room, there's no such thing anymore on Magic Online, but Yarok the Desecrated enter the battlefield effects with a little pinch of salt just to add a bit more flavour. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.